The blood on Grisha's hands was still warm when her father told her she was no longer welcome in the clan. She had committed the unforgivable sin of showing mercy to a wounded human scout, bandaging his leg and sending him back toward the border rather than taking his head as trophy. The other hunters had seen her hesitation, her gentle touch as she wrapped the cloth around his calf, the way she had helped him to his feet and pointed him toward safety. By the time they returned to the settlement, the story had already twisted into something worse. Some said she had embraced him. Others claimed she had wept. The truth mattered less than the perception. Grisha was soft, defective, a weak link in a clan that prided itself on strength and ruthlessness. Her mother had looked away when the judgment came. Her brothers said nothing in her defense. At 20 summers old, Grisha found herself standing at the edge of Ironjaw territory with a pack containing dried meat, a waterskin, a bedroll, and the weight of every disappointed glance she had ever received. The exile was not just for one act of mercy. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being wrong. Too gentle in her speech, too reluctant in the hunt, too quick to tend wounds rather than inflict them. Her tusks were smaller than most, her build leaner, and though she could track as well as any ranger and fight adequately when pressed, her heart was never in the violence her people celebrated. The autumn wind carried the scent of coming snow as she walked south, away from the mountains and toward the human lands. She had no plan beyond survival, no destination except away. The forest thickened around her as the elevation dropped, oak and maple replacing the hardy pines of the high country. She avoided roads and settlements, living off mushrooms and the occasional rabbit she could snare. At night she dreamed of home and woke with the ache of knowing she had no home to return to. 3 weeks into her exile, the first snow fell. Light at first, then heavier, the flakes clinging to her dark hair and melting against her green skin. She needed shelter, something more substantial than the lean toss she had been constructing each evening. The cold did not frighten her, but the wet did. Wet cold could kill even an orc if it lasted long enough without proper fire and walls. She smelled smoke before she saw the homestead. Wood smoke, the clean scent of burning oak. Her first instinct was to circle around it, to avoid any contact with humans who might see her as a threat or a trophy. But the snow was falling harder now, and darkness was coming early beneath the heavy clouds. She crept closer, moving silently through the trees until she could see the source of the smoke. The house was small but well built, constructed of logs with a stone chimney. There was a barn nearby, a chicken coop, and what looked like fields lying fallow beneath the gathering snow. A single light glowed in one window. No sounds of children playing, no voices calling to one another. Whoever lived here was either alone or very quiet. Grisha circled the property twice, watching for dogs or other signs of defense. Nothing. Just the smoke rising steadily from the chimney and the soft clucking of chickens settling for the night. Her stomach growled. She had not eaten since the previous morning. The logical choice was to keep moving, to find a cave or hollow tree and wait out the storm. The desperate choice was to approach and risk whatever came next. She was still debating when the door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall for a human, broad-shouldered but lean in the way of someone who worked hard for his meals. His hair was light brown touched with early gray, though he looked to be perhaps 35 summers. He wore simple clothes, wool and leather, and carried an axe that he used to split several logs on a stump near the door. He worked with the efficient economy of motion that spoke to long practice, each swing precise and measured. Grisha watched from behind an oak tree 30 yards distant, holding perfectly still. She had learned to be invisible when she chose to be, a skill that had earned her a place among the scouts even if her gentleness had lost her everything else. The man finished splitting his wood and gathered an armload, then paused. He turned slowly, scanning the tree line with the careful attention of someone who spent time alone and had learned to trust his instincts. His gaze passed over her hiding spot, moved on, then returned. For a long moment, they simply looked at one another across the snowy distance. Then he spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the cold air. "You are welcome to come closer to the fire if you need warmth. I will not raise alarm or weapon against you." Grisha said nothing. Her hand rested on the knife at her belt. "The storm will get worse before it improves," the man continued. He did not move toward her, did not make any threatening gesture. "I have soup on the fire and bread from yesterday. You are welcome to share it." "Why?" The word came out harsher than she intended, roughened by weeks of disuse. "Because you are standing in a snowstorm and I have a fire." He said it as if it were the simplest thing in the world, and because turning away someone in need makes a man less than he should be. "I am Orc." She made it a challenge, stepping slightly out from behind the tree so he could see her more clearly. Her green skin, her pointed ears, the small tusks that jutted from her lower jaw. "I have eyes," he said mildly. "The offer stands regardless." Grisha studied him for signs of deception, of hidden weapons or ambush. She found none. What she saw instead was something unexpected in his eyes, a profound weariness that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion and everything to do with loss. He looked like a man who had stopped being afraid of things because he had already lost what mattered most. "I will take shelter in your barn," she said finally. "I do not need to enter your house. The barn will be cold, even with the animals." "Cold does not frighten me," he nodded slowly. "As you wish. But the offer of food remains. I will leave a bowl on the porch. You can take it or leave it as you choose." He turned and went back inside without waiting for a response. Grisha remained frozen in place, uncertain what to make of this human who showed neither fear nor hostility. Through the window she could see him moving about, ladling something into a wooden bowl. True to his word, he opened the door a few minutes later and placed the bowl on the porch along with a chunk of bread wrapped in cloth. Then he retreated inside and closed the door. Grisha waited until full darkness had fallen before approaching. The bowl was still warm, filled with a thick soup of vegetables and beans. The bread was dense and good, the kind that filled the belly. She ate standing in the snow, watching the house for any sign of movement. When she finished, she washed the bowl with handfuls of snow and left it on the porch step. The barn was indeed cold, but dry. She found a ladder to the loft where hay was stored and made herself a nest in the corner farthest from the door. The sounds of the animals below were oddly comforting, the soft breathing of what sounded like a single cow, the rustle of chickens in their roosts. She wrapped herself in her bedroll and fell into an uneasy sleep. She woke at dawn to the sound of the barn door opening. Her hand went to her knife, but she forced herself to remain still and watchful in the loft above. The man entered with a bucket in one hand and a three-legged stool in the other. He sat down beside the cow and began to milk her with practiced efficiency, never once looking up toward the loft, though Grisha was certain he knew she was there. He worked in silence, finished his milking, and left as quietly as he had come. Through a gap in the boards, she watched him trudge through the snow back to the house. The storm had passed in the night, leaving everything covered in white. Smoke rose from the chimney. The world was painfully bright and still. Grisha remained in the loft, torn between the need to move on and the seductive comfort of shelter. She had no clear destination, no plan beyond survival. Winter was coming in earnest, and the memory of the warm soup and dry hay was dangerously appealing. She was still debating when she heard the door open again. This time when the man entered, he carried a steaming cup of something and a small plate. He set them at the base of the ladder, then stepped back. "Tea and breakfast," he called up without looking directly at where she hid. "In case you are still here." Then he left again. Grisha descended the ladder slowly, every sense alert for deception. The cup contained tea sweetened with honey. The plate held 2 eggs fried in butter and more of the dense bread. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. It had been so long since anyone had offered her kindness without expectation. That became the pattern. She stayed in the barn. He brought her food twice a day. They rarely spoke. She learned his routine through observation. He rose at dawn to milk the cow and feed the chickens. He chopped wood and tended to repairs around the property. In the afternoons, he often walked to the far field where a small fenced area sat beneath a spreading oak tree. He would stand there for long minutes, head bowed, before returning to the house. A grave, Grisha realized. Or perhaps more than one. On the 4th day, she finally descended from the loft while he was in the barn. He was forking hay down for the cow, his breath misting in the cold air. He paused when he saw her but did not seem startled. "Thank you for the food," she said. The words felt clumsy on her tongue. "You are welcome." He resumed his work. "Storm brought more snow last night. Roads will be impassable for a few days at least. I should move on. I am trespassing on your hospitality. Where will you go?" It was a simple question, but it struck at the heart of her situation. She had nowhere to go, no one waiting for her, no destination beyond a way. The silence stretched between them. "What is your name?" he asked when she did not answer. "Grisha." She hesitated. "What is yours?" "Aldric Norwood." He set aside the pitchfork and turned to face her properly. "You are welcome to stay through the winter if you need shelter. The barn is not being used for much else. In exchange, if you are willing, there is work to be done. Firewood to split, repairs to make, fences to mend before spring." "Why would you offer this?" Suspicion threaded through her voice. "You do not know me. My kind and yours are enemies." Aldric was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. 3 years ago I had a wife and a daughter. Fever took them both within a week of each other. Since then, I have been alone here, maintaining this place because I do not know what else to do with myself. You need shelter and I need help. It seems a practical arrangement. There was no self-pity in his words, just a statement of fact delivered with the same calm directness he brought to everything else. Grisha understood loss. She understood loneliness. She understood the kind of emptiness that came from being cast out from everything familiar. "I will work," she said. "I am strong and I learn quickly, but I will not bring trouble to you. If others come and find me here, if they seek to harm you because you shelter an orc, I will leave." "Fair enough." He offered his hand in the human gesture of agreement. She looked at his hand for a long moment before taking it. His palm was calloused and warm. The handshake was brief and firm. "There is a room in the house," Aldric said. "It was my daughter's. You would be more comfortable there than in the barn. The barn is sufficient." He nodded without argument. "Then I will show you where the tools are kept and what needs doing." They fell into a working partnership that was surprisingly comfortable. Aldric showed her how to split wood in the human manner, with wedge and sledge rather than just the axe alone. He taught her to identify which fence posts were rotting and needed replacement, how to patch the roof where snow had damaged the shingles, how to set snares for rabbits in a pattern around the property that would provide meat without depleting the population. Grisha brought her own skills to the arrangement. She could track deer through the forest and bring back venison that they smoked and preserved. She could identify edible plants and fungi even in winter. Her hearing was sharper than his. and more than once she alerted him to approaching travelers on the distant road in time for her to retreat to the forest until they passed. They worked side by side but spoke little those first weeks. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, more the quiet of two people focused on tasks that needed doing. But gradually, in small increments, they began to talk. It started with practical matters. Aldric asking her opinion on where to place a new fence line. Grisha inquiring about the best way to preserve the deer hide. Small exchanges that grew longer as comfort grew between them. One evening, as the sun set red and cold over the snow-covered fields, they stood together, examining a section of fence that needed replacing in the spring. Aldric leaned against a post that still held firm and looked out over his land. "I built this place with my father," he said. "Cleared the fields, raised the house and barn. He died the winter before I married, so he never met Sarah or little Emma. I always regretted that." Grisha did not know what to say to such personal revelation. Among orcs, grief was meant to be private, processed in solitude, but Aldric seemed to need to speak it aloud, as if keeping it silent gave it too much power. "They would have liked you," he continued. "Emma especially. She never met a living thing she did not try to befriend, had a way with animals that was almost magical." He smiled at the memory, and Grisha saw how grief and love could exist together in the same expression. "How old was she?" Grisha asked quietly. 7 summers. Still young enough to believe the world was mostly good. He pushed off from the fence post. "We should head back. Temperature is dropping." They walked back to the house in silence. That night, Aldric left an extra blanket on the barn step. The gesture touched something deep in Grisha's chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with physical comfort. Winter deepened. The snow piled higher, and the days grew short and brutally cold. They worked when weather permitted and huddled close to fires when it did not. Grisha began accepting Aldric's invitations to eat inside rather than taking her meals to the barn. The house was warm and well kept, though signs of the family that had lived there remained. A child's carved wooden horse on a shelf. A woman's shawl hanging by the door. Aldric did not hide these reminders, but neither did he speak of them unless prompted. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Aldric asked the question Grisha had been expecting since she arrived. "Why were you alone in the forest that day?" "Orcs travel in clans, or so I have always heard." Grisha stared into the flames, choosing her words carefully. "I was exiled. My clan believed I was defective. Defective how? Too gentle." The word tasted bitter. "I showed mercy to a wounded human scout. I tended his injury and let him go rather than killing him. This was seen as weakness, as a flaw in my nature that endangered the clan. They were not wrong, perhaps. I have always been soft. I feel too much, care too much. These are not valued traits among my people." Aldric was quiet for a long moment. "Among mine, such traits are meant to be virtues, though we do not always live up to that standard." "You do," Grisha said before she could stop herself. "Live up to it, I mean. You show kindness when you gain nothing from it. You offer shelter and food and ask only for honest work in return. Among orcs, this would be seen as foolish." "Perhaps I am foolish," Aldric said with a slight smile, "but I have found that holding tight to anger and suspicion makes a man smaller. I would rather be foolish and kind than wise and cruel." "Your wife and daughter made you this way," Grisha said. "It was not a question." "They made me better than I was," he agreed, "and losing them nearly made me worse. For a long time after they died, I did not care if I lived or died. I worked because my body knew the rhythms even when my heart was empty. And then one day I woke up and realized I could choose. I could let grief make me hard, or I could try to honor their memory by being the kind of man they believed I was. That must have been difficult." It still is, some days. He looked at her across the fire, his expression serious. But having someone else here, having a purpose beyond just existing, it helps. So I suppose I should thank you for that. Grisha did not know what to say to such naked honesty. She settled for a nod, then rose to return to the barn before the emotion building in her chest could spill over into something embarrassing. That night, she lay awake in her nest of hay and blankets, thinking about what Aldric had said. About choosing the kind of person to be, rather than letting circumstances dictate it. Among orcs, identity was fixed. You were born into a role and fulfilled it, or you were cast out. The idea that one could decide, could shape oneself according to chosen values rather than inherited expectations, felt revolutionary and terrifying in equal measure. The new year came quietly, marked only by a particularly beautiful sunrise that painted the snow gold and pink. Aldric mentioned the date in passing, and they shared a cup of spiced wine that evening in acknowledgement. The wine loosened Grisha's tongue, and she found herself telling him about her childhood, about feeling like a stranger in her own clan, about the constant pressure to be harder, fiercer, more like her brothers. "Did you never fit anywhere?" Aldric asked. "With my mother sometimes. When I was very young, she would tell me stories while she worked, old tales about the ancestors and the spirits of the mountain. But as I grew older, she pulled away, preparing me for the reality I would face, I suppose, teaching me that gentleness was a luxury I could not afford." "And yet you remained gentle despite that teaching." "Despite or because of it, I do not know." Grisha held the cup between her hands, feeling the warmth through the clay. "Perhaps being told you are wrong so many times makes you stubborn, determined to be yourself even if it costs everything." "It did cost everything," Aldric pointed out gently. "Yes," she met his eyes, "but I am still here, and I am still myself. There is power in that, I think, even if it is a small power." "I do not think it is small at all." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that neither was quite ready to examine. Grisha excused herself soon after, retreating to the safety of the barn and the uncomplicated warmth of her blankets. But something had shifted between them. She felt it in the way Aldric's gaze lingered on her when he thought she was not looking. Felt it in the way her own heart quickened when their hands accidentally brushed while working. Felt it in the growing reluctance to leave the warmth of the house each evening, and the way the barn seemed lonelier than it had before. Late winter brought a thaw, then a hard freeze that turned everything to ice. Aldric slipped while carrying water from the well and went down hard, his left leg twisting beneath him. Grisha heard his shout and was at his side in seconds, helping him up and taking his weight as they made their way back to the house. His ankle was not broken, but badly sprained. Grisha helped him to the chair by the fire and knelt to examine the injury with gentle fingers. She had learned basic healing from her mother, enough to know what could be fixed and what could not. "You need to stay off this for several days," she said, already moving to gather supplies for a poultice. "Keep it elevated, keep it cold until the swelling goes down, then warm to help it heal." "I have work to do," Aldric protested. "The animals need tending, I will tend the animals," Grisha interrupted. "I will do your work and mine both until you are healed. You will sit and rest and not argue with me about it." Aldric blinked at her, surprised by the steel in her voice. Then he laughed, wincing as the movement jarred his ankle. "Yes, madam." She made the poultice from herbs she had gathered in the autumn and wrapped his ankle with strips of clean cloth. Her touch was careful and sure, and she pretended not to notice the way Aldric watched her work, his expression unreadable. For the next week, Grisha took over all the tasks of the homestead. She milked the cow and fed the chickens, hauled water and split wood, prepared meals and tended the fire. Aldric protested at first, insisted he could manage more than she allowed, but Grisha was immovable. She had seen too many injuries turn serious because the injured refused to rest properly. In the evenings, she moved her bedroll into the house without asking permission, sleeping on the floor by the fire where she could hear if Aldric needed help in the night. He was a terrible patient, restless and frustrated by his immobility. To distract him, Grisha began telling him stories from orc tradition, the old legends her mother had taught her. She told him about the first mother, who had shaped the first orcs from stone and breathed life into them with her fury at the injustices of the world. About the wanderer, who walked between clans teaching wisdom and leaving only footprints behind. About the gentle warrior, who won her battles through compassion rather than cruelty and was remembered as the wisest leader the clans had ever known. "I have never heard these stories," Aldric said. "Among humans, orcs are portrayed as purely savage, monsters in the dark. I never considered that you had your own histories, your own heroes and teachers." "All people have stories," Grisha said. "It is how we understand ourselves and the world." "But your people do not want to see orcs as people with stories. It is easier to make us monsters." "I am sorry for that," Aldric said quietly, "for my people's blindness and cruelty. You are not responsible for what others do, only for your own choices." "Then I choose to listen," he said. "Tell me more, I want to know." So she did. Night after night, she shared the stories that had shaped her, and in return, Aldric shared his own. Human tales of heroes and tricksters, of love and loss, of the small everyday magics that made life worth living. They talked until the fire burned low, until words gave way to comfortable silence. One night, Grisha woke from a nightmare, a familiar dream of being hunted by her own clan, of running through endless forest with nowhere to hide. She sat up gasping, disoriented in the darkness of the unfamiliar room. "Grisha," Aldric's voice came from the bedroom, thick with sleep. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I am sorry I woke you, just a dream." She heard him shift the creak of the bed frame. A moment later he appeared in the doorway, favoring his injured ankle but moving more easily than he had days before. "You want to talk about it?" "There is nothing to say. It was just a dream." But her voice shook slightly, betraying the fear that still clung to her. Aldric limped over and lowered himself carefully to sit beside where she sat on her bedroll. "When Sarah and Emma died," he said quietly, "I had nightmares every night for months. Dreams where I could save them if I just moved fast enough, was smart enough, did the right thing. And then I would wake up and have to remember all over again that they were gone. How did you make it stop?" "Time, mostly, and talking about it when I needed to. The nightmares still come sometimes, but less often now, less sharp." He was quiet for a moment. "What do you dream about?" Grisha wrapped her arms around her knees. "Being hunted, being found and punished for my weakness. Sometimes I dream my mother is calling me home, and when I arrive everyone is dead and it is somehow my fault." She shook her head. "Foolish fears. Fear is never foolish, it simply is." Aldric's hand moved as if to touch her shoulder, then stopped, uncertain of the boundary. "You are safe here, Grisha. I know that does not erase the dreams, but I want you to know it anyway. No one will hunt you here. No one will punish you for being kind." The simple certainty in his voice made something in Grisha's chest crack open. Before she could stop herself, before she could think better of it, she turned toward him and buried her face against his shoulder. For a moment he froze, startled. Then his arms came around her, careful and warm. They stayed that way for a long time, two lonely people clinging to each other in the darkness. When Grisha finally pulled back, she could not meet his eyes. "I am sorry," she said. "I should not have, do not apologize." Aldric's voice was rough. "Not for that, not ever for that." She looked up then, and found his face very close to hers in the dim glow of the banked fire. His eyes were dark and warm, searching her expression with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and she could not say whether fear or hope was stronger in her chest. But instead he pulled back gently, putting safe distance between them. "You should try to sleep," he said. "Morning comes early." He returned to his room, and Grisha lay back down on her bedroll, her heart hammering. What was happening between them? What had already happened? She did not know, could not name the feeling that had wrapped around her ribs and made every breath both painful and sweet. By the end of the week, Aldric's ankle had healed enough for him to resume light work. Spring was coming. They could feel it in the air, see it in the way the snow began to recede from the southern slopes. There was work to be done, fields to prepare for planting, fences to repair before animals were let out to pasture. They worked together with the ease of long practice now, anticipating each other's movements, falling into comfortable rhythms of cooperation. But there was a new tension beneath the surface, a crackling awareness that made Grisha's skin feel too tight, and her thoughts scatter whenever Aldric stood too close. She tried to ignore it, to focus on the work, and the satisfaction of seeing the homestead come back to life after winter's sleep. But it was becoming harder to pretend she did not feel what she felt, did not want what she was beginning to understand she wanted. One warm afternoon in early spring, they were working together to reset a fence post that had heaved out of the ground during the freeze. It required both of them, Aldric steadying the post while Grisha tamped earth back around its base. They were pressed close together in the confined space, shoulders touching, breath mingling in the cool air. "Grisha," Aldric said quietly, not moving away, "I need to tell you something." Her heart kicked against her ribs. "What?" "These past months, having you here, working beside you, talking with you, it has meant more to me than I can properly say. You have brought life back to this place, back to me. And I do not want to lose that when spring comes fully and the roads are clear again." "I have nowhere else to go," Grisha said, voice carefully neutral even as hope unfurled in her chest. "If you will still have me as worker, I will stay." "That is not," he stopped, frustrated, searching for words. "I do not want you to stay as a worker, I want you to stay as more than that, as a partner." As he broke off, looking at her with such naked vulnerability that Grisha forgot to breathe. "I care for you, Grisha. More than I have cared for anyone since I lost my family. And I know that is complicated, I know there are 100 reasons why it should not be possible, but I needed you to know. I needed to tell you the truth." Grisha stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he was saying even as her heart understood perfectly. "You care for me," she repeated slowly. "An orc. A woman your people would call monster. I care for you. A woman who showed me that kindness and strength are not opposites. Who made me remember that life can be more than just enduring." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of dark hair from her face. His fingers lingered on her cheek, warm and gentle. "You are not defective, Grisha. You are extraordinary. And you are perfect exactly as you are." The words hit her like a physical blow. Perfect. He called her perfect. This thing she had been told her entire life made her wrong, made her weak, made her unworthy of her clan's name. He looked at her gentleness and called it perfect. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I do not know how to love someone. No one has ever wanted that from me before. Neither do I, truly. It has been so long and I am fumbling in the dark." Aldric's thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. "But I would like to try. If you want that, if you feel anything at all similar to what I feel." Grisha caught his hand in hers, holding it against her face. "I do," she said, the words coming out fierce and certain. "I care for you. I have tried not to, tried to keep distance between us because it seemed impossible, seemed like wanting something I could never have. But I do care. So much it frightens me. We can be frightened together, Aldric said with a small smile, and figure it out as we go. Then he leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle and hesitant, a question rather than a claim. Grisha melted into it, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart beating as frantically as her own. The world seemed to tilt and resettle around them, everything suddenly different yet exactly the same. When they finally pulled apart, Grisha found herself smiling, an expression that felt strange and wonderful on her face. Aldric was smiling too, looking younger and lighter than she had ever seen him. "So," he said, a bit breathless, "we should probably finish this fence." Grisha laughed, a sound of pure surprised joy. Yes, the fence, very important. They went back to work, but everything had changed. Their hands found excuses to brush together. Their glances lingered and heated. When they finished for the day and walked back to the house, Aldric reached for her hand and wove their fingers together, and Grisha felt like her heart might burst from the simple perfection of it. That night, she did not retreat to the barn. When Aldric offered her the spare bedroom again, she accepted. It was small and simply furnished, but clean and warm and filled with reminders of the child who had once slept there. Grisha lay awake for a long time, running her fingers over the carved wooden horse on the small shelf beside the bed, thinking about the family Aldric had lost and the strange new thing they were trying to build together. Spring came in earnest, and with it came work. They planted the fields together, Grisha learning the rhythms of human agriculture. She proved to have a gift for it, her patience and attention to detail serving her well. The chickens thrived under her care, and even the cows seemed fonder of her than of Aldric. They fell into domestic rhythms with surprising ease. Grisha cooked dinner while Aldric tended to evening chores. They worked together on repairs and projects around the homestead. In the evenings they sat together, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in comfortable silence. And when night came, they went to their separate rooms, the physical distance a reminder that they were taking this slowly, carefully, giving themselves time to be sure. But the more time passed, the more sure Grisha became. She watched Aldric with the animals, patient and kind. Watched him work the land with the dedication of someone who understood the sacred trust of stewardship. Watched him smile at her across the dinner table, his eyes warm with affection and desire held in check by respect for her comfort. She fell in love with him the way spring came to the mountains gradually, then all at once, until the world was transformed and there was no going back to winter. One evening in late spring, they walked together to the fenced area beneath the oak tree where Sarah and Emma were buried. Grisha had never asked to come here, had always held back when Aldric made his solitary visits. But tonight he had taken her hand and led her here, and she understood it was an invitation, a sharing of his most sacred grief. Two simple wooden markers stood side by side. Sarah Norwood, beloved wife and mother. Emma Norwood, light of our lives. Fresh wildflowers lay against the markers placed there by Aldric earlier in the day. "I want them to know about you," Aldric said quietly. "I come here and tell them about my days, about what is happening in my life. And you are the biggest thing that has happened since they left. I want them to know that I am happy again, that I found someone who makes me want to live again rather than just survive." Grisha's throat tightened. "Do you think they would approve of me?" "I think Sarah would have liked your strength and your kindness. I think Emma would have followed you around asking 1,000 questions and begging for stories." He smiled at the thought. "I think they would want me to be happy, and you make me happy, Grisha." happier than I thought I could be again." "I am glad," Grisha said softly. She knelt and placed her hand gently on the earth between the two graves. "I will honor their memory by treating his heart carefully," she said, speaking to the dead women as if they could hear. "And by trying to be worthy of what he offers me. This I promise." When she stood, Aldric pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. They stood that way for a long time as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. And Grisha understood that she had been given something precious and rare. Permission to love this man without competing with his grief, space to be part of his life without erasing what came before. That night, when they returned to the house and the hour grew late, Grisha paused at the door to her room. Aldric had continued toward his own room but stopped when he realized she was not moving. "Aldric," she said, her voice steady despite the nervousness fluttering in her stomach. "I do not want to sleep alone tonight." He turned slowly, his expression careful. "Grisha, we do not have to rush anything. I am not rushing," she interrupted. "I am certain, I have been certain for weeks now. I want to be with you fully, completely, if you want that too." For a moment he simply looked at her, and she saw desire and caution war in his expression. Then he crossed the distance between them and cupped her face in his hands. "I want that," he said, his voice rough. "I want you, but I need you to be absolutely sure. There is no going back from this, Grisha, not for me. If we do this, it is not casual, it is not temporary. It is choosing each other, committing to this despite all the complications. I know." She turned her head to press a kiss to his palm. "I choose you, I choose this, I choose us." He kissed her then, and there was nothing hesitant about it this time. It was heat and hunger and promise all tangled together. Grisha kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt as she pressed closer. They made it as far as his room, leaving a trail of discarded clothes behind them. When Aldric laid her down on his bed and covered her body with his own, Grisha felt as if she were finally, truly home, not in a place but in a person. In this moment. In the way he touched her with reverence and desire in equal measure. They came together with passion tempered by tenderness, each focused on the other's pleasure as much as their own. It was not perfect, there were awkward moments and whispered questions and small adjustments as they learned each other's bodies. But it was real and honest and filled with something that might not yet be love, but was certainly growing toward it. Afterward, Grisha lay in Aldric's arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder and she felt utterly at peace. "Stay with me," Aldric said quietly. "Not just tonight. Always. Make this your home. Let me be your family." Grisha lifted her head to look at him. "You are certain. The prejudice your people have, the difficulty this will cause, I am certain." He met her eyes steadily. "I do not care what others think. I care about you, about us, about building a life together. Everything else can be managed." "Then yes," Grisha said, smiling. "Yes, I will stay. This is my home. You are my family." They sealed the promise with another kiss and then another, and the night stretched on in whispered words and tangled limbs and the quiet joy of two people choosing each other against all odds. Summer came and brought with it a challenge neither of them had anticipated. A wagon rolled up the road one warm afternoon while Grisha and Aldric were working in the garden. They heard it coming with enough time for Grisha to retreat to the house, but she refused. "No," she said firmly when Aldric suggested it. "No more hiding. This is my home. I will not cower in the house every time someone approaches." Aldric looked worried but nodded. "Then we face it together." The wagon contained a family, husband and wife and 3 children, traveling south to settle in the new territories. They pulled up to ask for water and directions, and the husband was in the middle of a friendly greeting when he caught sight of Grisha standing beside Aldric. His expression transformed instantly from friendly to hostile. His hand moved to the weapon at his belt. "There is an orc here," he said sharply. "Step away from it, friend, before it attacks." "She," Aldric corrected firmly, moving slightly in front of Grisha. "Her name is Grisha, and she is my partner. She means no harm to you or your family." "Partner," the word dripped with disbelief and disgust. "You are cohabitating with a greenskin. Have you lost your mind?" "I have found my heart," Aldric said calmly, though Grisha could see the tension in his shoulders. "Now you asked for water and directions. I will provide both, and then I will ask you to move on." The wife had gathered the children close, eyeing Grisha with naked fear. The oldest child, a boy of perhaps 10, stared at Grisha with wide eyes. "Is it true what they say? That orcs eat human children?" Before Aldric could respond, Grisha stepped forward, making her movements slow and non-threatening. She knelt so she was at eye level with the boy. "No," she said gently. "That is not true. Orcs eat the same things humans do, meat and grain and vegetables, and we love our children just as your parents love you. We are not so different, your people and mine." The boy studied her with the frank curiosity of childhood. "You have tusks." "I do." "Just as you have. What do you have that I do not?" She made it a game, trying to ease the fear. "Freckles," the boy offered. Grisha smiled. "Yes, you have freckles, and they are very fine freckles. They look like little stars across your nose." The boy's fear visibly eased, but his father pulled him back roughly. "Do not speak to it," he snapped. Then, to Aldric, "You are making a mistake. These creatures cannot be trusted. It will turn on you eventually." "She has had ample opportunity to harm me and has chosen only kindness," Aldric said, his voice still calm but edged with steel now. "I suggest you remember that you are a guest here asking for aid. Do not insult my household again." The standoff lasted another tense moment before the wife murmured something to her husband. Practical need won out over prejudice. Aldric provided water and clear directions, and the family departed quickly, the wife looking back several times as if expecting Grisha to chase them down the road. When they were gone, Grisha let out a long breath. "That could have gone worse. It could have gone better." Aldric pulled her into a hug. "I am sorry you had to face that, sorry that people are so quick to fear. I knew it would happen eventually. We have been isolated here, but the world is not going to leave us alone forever." She pulled back to look at him seriously. "Are you certain this is worth it? The judgment, the hostility, the complications?" "Without question," Aldric said immediately. "You are worth every bit of difficulty." "Never doubt that." But the encounter had rattled them both. That night, lying in bed, they talked about what to do. "We could go somewhere more remote," Aldric suggested. "Deeper into the frontier where people ask fewer questions. Or we could stay here and weather it," Grisha countered. "Running feels like admitting we are doing something wrong. I do not want to live that way." "Neither do I." Aldric was quiet for a moment. "Then we stay. We build our life here, and we face whatever comes with our heads held high." They sealed the decision with a kiss, but Grisha could not quite shake the fear that had settled in her stomach. The world beyond their homestead was not kind to those who crossed boundaries, who loved outside the prescribed lines. How long before someone decided that Aldric's arrangement with an orc was more than just odd but dangerous? How long before they faced real threat rather than just hostile words? The answer came sooner than she expected. It was high summer, the crops growing tall in the fields when Grisha heard riders approaching at speed. She was in the barn, and her first instinct was to hide. But she had promised herself she would not cower in her own home. She stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight to see 5 men on horseback riding hard up the lane. They wore the rough leather and weapons of frontier militia, Local men organized to protect settlements from threats. And from the way they were looking at her, they considered her a threat. Aldric emerged from the house, alerted by the sound of hooves. He moved to stand beside Grisha, his expression wary. "Good afternoon," he called out, friendly but cautious. "What brings you to my land?" The lead rider, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, did not return the greeting. "We have had reports of an orc on this property. We have come to assess the threat and remove it if necessary." "There is no threat," Aldric said firmly. "Grisha lives here with my permission and has harmed no one. An orc living with a human is unnatural," another rider spoke up. "Against the laws of God and man, you are harboring a dangerous creature." "She is no more dangerous than you or I," Aldric shot back. "Less so, given that you are the ones who rode onto my land armed and making threats." Grisha placed a hand on Aldric's arm, a gentle warning not to escalate. "I will leave," she said quietly, her heart breaking even as she said it. "I will not be the cause of violence or trouble for him. I will go." "Like hell you will," Aldric said immediately. He turned to the militia. "This is my land. She is under my protection. You have no authority here." "We have the authority of common defense," the scarred leader said. "And the authority of force. Step aside, farmer. We will remove the orc and you can go back to your normal life." "My normal life includes her," Aldric said, and there was something dangerous in his voice now. "She is my partner. My family. And I will defend her with my life if you force me to." Grisha's heart clenched. He meant it. This gentle man who had shown her nothing but kindness was prepared to fight 5 armed men to protect her. The magnitude of that devotion was staggering and terrifying. "Aldric, please," she said urgently. "Do not do this. Do not throw your life away. I will leave. I will. Where will you go?" He looked at her, his eyes fierce. "Back to a clan that cast you out into the wilderness alone, to live as an exile and fugitive forever. No, this is your home. You belong here, and I will not let them take you." The militiamen exchanged glances. They had expected an easy removal, not resistance from a civilian. The scarred leader reached for his weapon. "Last chance, farmer. Step aside." Aldric did not move. Everything hung on a knife's edge. Grisha could feel violence gathering in the air like a storm about to break. She was calculating odds, planning how to fight if she must, where to run if flight became the only option. Her hand moved to the long knife at her belt. Then a voice called out from behind the militia. "I would think carefully before starting a conflict on private land without just cause." Everyone turned to see an older man approaching on foot from the direction of the road. He was perhaps 60, dressed in simple but well-made clothes, and carried himself with an authority that made the militia straighten despite themselves. "Magistrate Brennan," the scarred leader said, surprise evident in his voice. "We were told—" "I know what you were told," Brennan interrupted. "I received the same report, which is why I came to investigate personally rather than sending armed men to potentially make a tragic mistake." He stopped a few feet from Aldric and Grisha, studying them both with sharp eyes. "Aldric Norwood, is it? I knew your father. Good man." "Thank you, sir," Aldric said cautiously. "And you are the orc woman causing such consternation." Brennan looked at Grisha without apparent fear or hostility, just assessing. "Have you harmed anyone, stolen anything, threatened the peace in any way?" "No, sir," Grisha said, matching his directness. "I have lived here as guest and worker since winter. I have taken nothing that was not freely given and harmed no one." "Can anyone here contradict that statement?" Brennan looked at the militia. None of them spoke. "Can anyone provide evidence of actual wrongdoing rather than simply existence?" Silence. Brennan nodded slowly. "Then there is no crime being committed. This is private land, and Mr. Norwood has every right to choose his company and employees. You are dismissed." "But, sir," the scarred leader protested. She is an orc. The law prohibits violence, theft, and trespass, Brennan said crisply. It does not prohibit orcs from existing on private land with the owner's permission. Unless you can show me specific statute that says otherwise, you have no authority here. Now go before I charge you with attempted unlawful seizure and disturbing the peace. The militia left reluctantly, shooting dark looks at Grisha and Aldric as they rode away. When they were gone, Brennan turned back to the couple. You have made powerful enemies, he said bluntly. There are those who will not accept this arrangement no matter what the law says. I understand, Aldric said, but I will not send her away. This is her home. Brennan looked between them and something in his expression softened. Love? He asked simply. Yes, Aldric said without hesitation. Grisha felt her heart swell at the certainty in his voice. Then I wish you luck, Brennan said. You will need it. But for what it is worth, I see no crime in choosing kindness over fear. Your father would be proud of the man you have become. He tipped his hat to them both. I will do what I can to keep the zealots at bay, but I suggest you be vigilant. Not everyone respects the law as they should. After he left, Grisha and Aldric stood in the yard, still processing what had nearly happened. Grisha was shaking, the delayed fear finally catching up to her. You would have fought them, she said. You would have died for me, without question. Aldric pulled her close. You are mine to protect, mine to love. That is not negotiable. Your people will never accept us. Then they will have to learn to live with disappointment. He cupped her face in his hands. I meant what I said, Grisha. You are my family now, my partner. And I hope, he stopped, seeming to gather courage. I hope one day to call you my wife if you will have me. Grisha's breath caught. Wife? Not now, not today. I know it is fast and complicated and possibly illegal depending on how the law is interpreted. He smiled slightly. But yes. Eventually, if you want that, if you could see yourself bound to me in the formal way, not just the way of the heart. Orcs do not marry as humans do, Grisha said slowly, but we have bonding ceremonies. Promises made before witnesses, commitments sealed by the exchange of gifts and the mingling of blood. Then we could do both, or either, or make our own ceremony that honors both traditions. He was watching her carefully. What do you say, Grisha? Will you consider sharing your life with me in whatever form feels right? Joy bubbled up in her chest, pure and effervescent. Yes, she said, smiling through sudden tears. Yes, I will consider it. I will more than consider it. I want that, Aldric. I want to be yours, and for you to be mine in whatever way we can make it real. He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and the fear of the afternoon dissolved into the warmth of the promise they had just made to each other. They spent the rest of the summer preparing, both for the practical necessities of homestead life and for the commitment they had decided to make. Aldric asked around discreetly and learned that there was no specific law against human-orc marriage, but also no law supporting it. They would have to find someone willing to perform the ceremony, which proved challenging. In the end, they decided to create their own ceremony, a blending of traditions that honored both their backgrounds. They chose the autumn equinox as the date, the balance point between light and dark, a fitting symbol for the balance they had found together. On the morning of the equinox, Aldric woke early and went to the graves beneath the oak tree. Grisha watched from a distance, giving him privacy for his conversation with the dead. When he returned, his eyes were red, but his smile was genuine. They are happy for us, he said simply. I know they are. They prepared together, washing in the stream and dressing in their best clothes. Aldric wore a shirt his wife had made him years ago, a deliberate choice to honor her memory even as he moved forward into a new future. Grisha wore a tunic she had sewn herself from cloth Aldric had bought in town, dyed the deep blue-green of pine forests. They had no witnesses except the land itself and the animals they tended. They stood in the garden they had planted together, surrounded by the fruits of their shared labor. Aldric spoke first. "I, Aldric Norwood, take you, Grisha, as my partner and wife. I promise to care for you in sickness and health, to work beside you, to honor your wisdom, to protect you when you need protection and stand back when you do not. I promise to love you with all that I am, for all the days I have remaining." Then Grisha spoke, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I, Grisha, who has no clan name because I was cast out, take you, Aldric Norwood, as my partner and husband. I promise to stand beside you in all things, to share my strength when you need it and accept yours when I do. I promise to be gentle with your heart and fierce in your defense. I promise to love you with all that I am, for all the days I have remaining." They exchanged gifts. Aldric gave Grisha a silver bracelet that had belonged to his mother, a circle with no break to represent continuity and commitment. Grisha gave Aldric a carving she had made over long weeks, a small figure of a man and woman standing back to back, weapons down, defending each other through simple presence rather than violence. Then they drew small knives and pricked their fingers, letting blood well up. They pressed their fingers together, mixing their blood in the orc tradition. "Blood of my blood," Grisha said. "Life of my life," Aldric responded. They kissed as husband and wife, and the autumn sun blessed them with golden light. That night they celebrated with a feast they had prepared together, roasted chicken and fresh bread, and the last of the summer vegetables from their garden. They drank wine and told stories, and made love with the slow thoroughness of people who had all the time in the world and intended to savor every moment. The next morning, they woke as a married couple and went about their work as always. The chores did not change. The rhythm of their days remained the same, but everything felt different, settled, right in a way it had not quite been before. Over the following months, they faced continued prejudice and hostility from some quarters. Twice more, militia came to investigate reports. Both times, Magistrate Brennan intervened on their behalf. Some of the nearby farmers refused to trade with Aldric. Others, braver or more curious, began to cautiously accept the strange household. One day in midwinter, a young orc woman appeared at the edge of the property. She was thin and frightened, clearly an exile like Grisha had been. Grisha recognized the look in her eyes, the desperate hope warring with the expectation of rejection. Without consulting Aldric, Grisha called out to the orc woman, inviting her to the fire. Aldric came out to see what was happening and found Grisha feeding soup to a stranger who looked ready to bolt at any moment. "Her name is Karga," Grisha explained. "She was cast out for refusing an arranged bonding to a warrior twice her age. She has been wandering for weeks." Aldric looked at the frightened young orc, then at his wife, and understood immediately what she was asking without asking. "The barn is empty and cold," he said. "We could clear out the small storage room in the house. It is not much, but it is warm and dry." Karga looked between them with disbelief. "You would shelter me, both of you, a human and an orc together, and you would take in another orc." "We know what it is to be cast out," Grisha said gently. "We know what it is to find kindness where you least expect it. We can offer you the same." Karga stayed. She proved to be a hard worker and surprisingly talented with plants, and by spring she had taken over much of the garden work. She was skittish around Aldric at first, but his patient kindness eventually won her over the same way it had won Grisha. In the second year of their marriage, another exile found them, this time a young orc man who had been cast out for being too weak for warrior training. Then, a human widow fleeing an abusive brother-in-law. Then, a pair of orphaned human children who had been living rough in the woods. Without planning it, without intending it, Aldric and Grisha's homestead became a haven for the lost and cast out. They expanded the house, added another barn, cleared more fields. The work was endless but purposeful. They were building something new, a family not of blood but of choice, a community that rejected the old divisions and hatreds in favor of something more difficult and more beautiful. Not everyone accepted what they were doing. There were threats and vandalism. Once, someone tried to burn the barn while they slept, but they also found allies. Magistrate Brennan became a regular visitor, bringing news and aid. A few of the braver farmers began to trade with them, and slowly, grudgingly, the hostility began to fade into wary tolerance. 3 years after Grisha first stumbled onto Aldric's property as a desperate exile, she stood in the garden on a warm spring morning, her hand resting on the slight swell of her belly. The pregnancy had been a surprise, something she had not been certain was even possible between orc and human. But it was happening, and the midwife they had consulted said all seemed well. Aldric came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his hands covering hers on their growing child. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. Grisha leaned back against him, watching as Karga taught the 2 human children how to identify edible plants in the garden, as the young orc man worked with easy strength to repair a fence, as smoke rose from the chimney of their home. "I am more than happy," she said. "I am home. I am loved. I am exactly who I was meant to be. My clan called me defective because I was too gentle. You called me perfect for the same reason, and you were right." "We were both right," Aldric corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You are perfect, and so is this life we have built together." Their child was born in the autumn, a daughter with green-tinged skin and her father's eyes. They named her Emma Sarah, honoring the family that had come before and the family that would continue after. She was the first of what would eventually be 3 children, each one proof that love could transcend boundaries that fear insisted were absolute. Over the years, their household continued to grow and change. Some of those they sheltered eventually moved on to build their own lives. Others stayed and became permanent family. The homestead prospered, and slowly, painfully, the area around them began to shift. Other mixed households began to form, tentatively at first. Prejudice did not disappear, but it began to crack under the weight of ordinary kindness and daily cooperation. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Grisha and Aldric stood once more in the garden, now much expanded and tended by many hands. Around them, their children played with other children, orc and human running together without thought to the differences that still divided the wider world. "Did you ever imagine this?" Grisha asked, gesturing to the thriving community around them. "When you found me hiding in the woods, did you think it would lead here?" "I imagined someone to talk to over winter," Aldric admitted with a smile. "I imagined a friend, maybe. I did not imagine a wife, children, a household full of laughter and life. I did not imagine that choosing kindness once would lead to all of this." "I was told I was defective," Grisha said, repeating the words that had once caused her such pain. "My gentleness was seen as weakness, a flaw that endangered my people, but you saw it as strength. You built your life around it, and look what we made together." Aldric pulled her close, this woman who had transformed his world through the simple act of being herself. "You were never defective. You were exactly what the world needed, even when the world was too blind to see it. And I will spend the rest of my life grateful that I was smart enough to recognize that." They kissed, surrounded by the family they had chosen and built and loved into being. And if sometimes Grisha still dreamed of her lost clan, if sometimes she wondered what they would think if they could see her now, Those thoughts came less frequently as the years passed. She had found her true clan, her true family, her true home. Not in a place or a bloodline, but in the people who valued her gentleness, who saw her heart as an asset rather than a liability. The orc girl they had called Defective had become a wife, a mother, a leader of an unlikely community. And she was, in every way that mattered, exactly perfect. The seasons turned, the children grew, the fields prospered, and the homestead that had once housed only grief and loss now rang with joy and life. It was not always easy. Prejudice still existed, challenges still arose, and there were days when the weight of being pioneers in a new way of living felt nearly unbearable. But every evening, when the work was done and the household gathered for the evening meal, Grisha would look around the table at the faces she loved, human and orc, blood, family, and chosen family, all of them together, and she would know with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She had been cast out for being too gentle, and in being cast out, she had found the place where her gentleness was not just accepted but celebrated. She had found a man who saw her heart and called it beautiful. She had found a home that valued kindness over cruelty, cooperation over conflict, love over fear. And in the end, that made all the difference. Years later, when Grisha was an old woman with grandchildren playing at her feet, travelers would sometimes stop at the thriving settlement that had grown up around that original homestead. They would marvel at the mixed community, at orcs and humans living and working side by side in apparent harmony. And if they asked how such a thing had come to be, they would be told the story of a gentle orc woman and a widowed human farmer who chose kindness when the world demanded hate. Some dismissed it as legend, too idealistic to be true. But those who stayed long enough to see the community in action, to witness the daily miracles of cooperation and mutual respect, came away changed. They carried the story with them, spreading it like seeds that might take root in other soil, in other hearts. And Grisha, sitting in the sun with her husband beside her and her family around her, would smile and know that her gentleness had never been a defect at all. It had been the greatest gift she had to offer. And it had changed not just her world, but the world itself, one act of kindness at a time. The sun set golden over the fields they had planted together, the home they had built together, the family they had chosen together. And in the gathering twilight, Grisha took Aldric's weathered hand in her own and knew that this right here, this beautiful, complicated, messy, perfect life was exactly what happiness looked like. Her clan had called her defective because she was too gentle. A widower had called her perfect for the same reason. And in choosing to believe him over them, in choosing love over fear and kindness over cruelty, she had found everything she never knew she needed. She had found home. She had found family. She had found herself. And that, in the end, was the truest magic of all.